Good afternoon, everybody. We'll get started. My name's Clayton Hyam. I'm the presiding member for this Metro Inner Development Assessment Panel meeting this afternoon. With me, I have Karen Hyde, the deputy presiding member, Jen Coltaz, the specialist member, and Councillor Bronwyn Waugh as the councillor of Perth. I declare the meeting open at 1:04 p.m. Acknowledge that we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Woodjack people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people and community. This meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP regulations and standing orders under the Planning and Development Assessment Panels Regulations 2011. It's being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of the Regulations 2011. Members are reminded to announce their name and title when speaking. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. I have an apology from Councillor Cridland, local government member from the city of Perth. There are no members listed as being on leave of absence, and minutes from previous meetings are available on the DAP website. Moving into part B, seeking declarations of due consideration. All members familiar with it for you today. Thank you. Disclosures of interest. I have one here for Councillor Bronwyn Waugh, that she was contacted by and attended an on-site visit by several neighbours to the proposed development. Councillor Waugh met with the neighbours well before the application was on the agenda and believes it was in her capacity as a candidate, as she is not the Millport Ward councillor and understands that Councillor Cridland was not contacted. I'm happy for the Executive Director has agreed that she can sit and deliberate on the matter. No Form 1 DAP applications. We move into item 4.1, which is the modified land use mix and minor build form modifications to development at 72 to 74 Point Road. We have a number of presenters. A written submission, first of all, from Alan Stewart. Alan's not doing a presentation, but he's put in a written submission. And is Craig Dermer now available? No, he's not available. Okay. All right. We've read Craig's submission anyway, so we'll take that as a written submission. We've got a number of presenters from the applicants there. Can you please keep your presentation to 3 minutes each? So move to, I don't know who's going first, Daniel. We'll ask questions after you've finished your presentations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good afternoon, members. My name is Jonathan Brello. I'm representing Edge New Living. I'd like to start by saying Edge has had a long-term interest in the city of South Perth dating back to the site acquisition in 2014. Since this time, there's been many high-rise developments proposed within the precinct, which has not been feasible and in turn not developed, leaving sites empty. Edge has been determined to deliver on the City of South Perth's long-term vision for the development of the South Perth Peninsula, as well as delivering high-quality living to our long-standing buyers on this project. Due to legal and unforeseen construction market challenges, Edge has had to sell this building 3 times to get to a point where we can deliver 115 residential dwellings and 1 commercial unit in a feasible manner. The development is highly valued by locals, with some buyers sticking with us throughout the redevelopment on each occasion. Since the initial DA was approved, Lumia has lived through 3 developments, through 3 different planning frameworks. Given the unprecedented construction market challenges Perth has encountered, it has lengthened the build procurement and overall duration. As a result of this prolongation and the complex design natures of such large development, it was inevitable that minor tweaks to the approved design would be necessary, which is what this Form 2 is projecting. Discussions with the City of South Perth in late 2023 and early 2024 led Edge to believe that the Form 2 proposed would receive a supportive RAR based on the minor nature of the changes to the approved design and the City's discretional powers. We commenced construction and shortly after were advised that the discretion from the City of South Perth was limited, and whilst they were supportive of the proposal and the project, they could no longer recommend approval. The construction team has recently submitted the 3rd building permit to extend the current works on site in an attempt to ensure that the longer than anticipated approval for Form 2 would not prevent completion of 115 homes by the end of 2026. If the minor amendments within this Form 2 are not approved by the DAP, the viability of this development will be severely impacted and potentially seeing construction cease. In conclusion, we believe we've found the sweet spot between complying with existing approval and aligning with the City's more contemporary approach to public benefit, the result of which is to deliver more apartments in an environment where there is high housing demand, almost entirely within the development envelope of the existing approval. I'd like to pass on to Dean.
Good afternoon, presiding members. My name is Dean Robinson from Hill Architects. I'm the design lead for the project. I'd just like to start with a slide presentation and focus primarily on the design components of the project and the changes that have been implemented. We're just having some technical difficulties loading the presentation. Okay, I think it seems to be up and running. The first slide essentially compares the 2 designs. One is the approved design, and the second one is the proposed design. Important to note that the very minor discernible differences when shown side by side. The revised design shows an improved hierarchy, a more clearly defined top of tower, by the use of dark coloured banding elements and sophites, a clearer definition of podium and podium transition by extending the residential glazing line further down into the podium, by eliminating the glazing line that was there previously and creating a deeper recess and step backs to that level. It creates a cleaner, more aesthetic and appealing transition to this area. So any of the changes that we've implemented have actually improved the design in our opinion. If we go to the next slide, please. Actually, I'll just point out that the 970 mil increase proposed is fairly minor and barely discernible. On these slides, we're comparing the top of podium changes. Previously, we had public amenity and commercial spaces on level 4, which is the top of podium. There was a lot of expansive terrace space in that location. By adding the residential component to this level, we've actually allowed a significant increase in landscaping. This has improved the amenity for the residences on this level, but also allowed for better visual connection from the residents above looking down to this area. So the increase has gone from 66 to 300 square metres, a 234 square metre increase in landscaping area. Next slide. It was important just to identify any plot ratio increases that would occur in the development through the changes and implementation, inclusion of additional residential apartments. We were very careful not to increase plot ratio, and through the differences that have been applied to the various levels, we've actually ended up with a net balance of 0 increase. And once again, no discernible difference to the external fabric of the building. Next slide. So this one focuses on these views demonstrate the subtle change made to the top of podium, introduction of apartments within their podium, the reduction of massing to the ground floor tenancies, The inclusion of balconies to residential tenancies within the podium area helps break up and soften the glazed facade that was there previously. When occupied, elements of greenery will also permeate through and contribute to a more residential look and feel in this location. Ground floor tenancy glazing width has increased, improving the amenity and commercial space and improving the level of activation that we're doing on this street front. Next slide. In this slide, you can clearly see the top of podium transition offers an increased setback by incorporating the residential glazing line, providing a softer transition to podium and an improved aesthetic. This slide here, it's worth highlighting the active Mill Point Road frontage will be softened with expressed organic planters and the added visual interest of public art within the landscaped area and within the residential entry in the form of lighting, adding to the legibility of these spaces. Next slide. Additionally, the quality of residential amenity remains unchanged and is considered at the top end of the apartment projects in Perth. The highly articulated building will be a positive addition to the streetscape and views from adjacent sites. Next slide. These slides just highlight the level of amenity that's been adopted in this development. This is an example of the residential lounge, wine cellar, billiards lounge room. We've got a gymnasium. This is one of the elements that was previously located on the 4th floor and is now moved to the 18th floor amenity level, making it a lot easier for residents to access and makes more sense in terms of a cohesive design approach to that level. Once again, the final slide just highlighting the level of amenity that's been adopted. This is the pool and barbecue. It's not 3 minutes, I believe. Thank you.
Good afternoon, panel members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the approval of these minor design changes that have important project feasibility implications that will enable the delivery of this prominent and long-planned project within a rapidly evolving South Perth. This building was one of the first approved in the South Perth Peninsula in 2015 and again in 2020. This building epitomises the city's broad vision for the peninsula, as set out in the various iterations of the planning schemes over the years and now the activity centre plan, being a tall, slender tower that has been awarded design excellence through rigorous prior design reviews. We have discussed these proposed minor amendments at length with the city since October last year, and the city's report that is before you supports the design merits of the project, and I read a very positive tone throughout the city's report that they do in fact want this project to proceed. In my deputation request form, I've responded to and I've set out how and why I disagree with the city's reasons for refusal. I'm greatly appreciative of the panel for requesting an alternate recommendation for approval, as I believe there is discretion available to MIDAP to approve this application today. I wholly support the alternate recommendation for approval that is contained within the Reg 13 request addendum section of the agenda. Since the panel referral on October 10, when we were last here, I believe there is now a wealth of information available for the panel to enable it to issue an approval today. I note there is discretion available to the DAP to approve this, as the proposed minor amendments, which the city agrees are appropriate as a Form 2 application, from a Form 1 application, by their very nature and not comprehensive new development, to which the specific building height and tower floor height provisions of the activity centre plan would apply. In terms of the changes themselves, the city has supported the level 9 tower floor plate from a design merit perspective, and the report acknowledges that this level will not be visible from a pedestrian scale or from adjoining properties, and that it has no tangible effect on overshadowing. This is because there is no change to the overall tower floor plate as it adds exterior edge, as the building is characterised by the distinctive gentle curve wraparound balconies that effectively form the exterior edge of the tower. Viewed in this way, there is no change that requires reassessment under the scheme. Similarly, with the building height increase, which is less than 1 metre, with no change in the number of stories, this is considered extremely minor in the context of a building of 100 metres plus. The city has similarly acknowledged that this will not contribute towards actual perceived building bulk, and has acknowledged that this matter is so minor that it does not even warrant development approval, as the city has referred to the de minimis principle. As such, this is so minor, in my view, it does not warrant the DAP's consideration and ought not to be a reason for refusal. The report before you, to my reading, is positive It reads like the city wants to approve this development and wants this development to proceed. For the reasons set out in my deputation request form, I believe there is discretion to approve this today. I'm mindful of time. I'm mindful that there's a written deputation from Alan Stewart. There's been an exchange of emails this afternoon, which I believe satisfies that submitter and his client. I'm happy to speak to that in questions. And in closing, before I pass on to Belinda, your approval is respectfully requested, as it will support the delivery of a long-planned project that will make a significant contribution to local housing supply in a manner that aligns with the city's own vision for the peninsula and the broader state government objectives and priorities to meet housing demand. Thank you.
Stan, thank you, presiding member and members of the panel. You've received a letter from me setting out the position in relation to the scheme. I don't intend reading that verbatim. I was involved in the approval of this through the State Administrative Tribunal, which resulted in, I think, a record 269-page judgment. If there are any questions on that, because I do understand that there were some queries about that at the last DAP meeting, both Dan and I are able to answer any of the questions that relate to that project, to that approval. Having said that, we don't think that anything that happened there is necessarily determinative in relation to this application. The current application is essentially for a change of use and for minor physical changes to the existing design of the building. The change of use is not controversial, as we understand it from the City of South Perth, based upon the substitution of those land uses for a financial contribution which is more consistent with the vision and policies of the city in relation to their community purpose fund that came about after the institution of the Activity Centre Plan and Amendment 61. What I wanted to focus on was the power of the DAP to make a determination based upon the current provisions in LPS 7. And I'll say as an aside, you will all remember a time when minor variations of this nature would never come back for a planning approval, because under the old regime, prior to the Building Act commencing in 2012, these sorts of things were essentially regularised through a building permit process. That is no longer available because there is a requirement for a consistency between the planning approval and your building permit plans, and it's on that basis that approval is sought for these very minor variations. In the State Administrative Tribunal judgment, His Honour Judge Parry made some commentary about the complexity of these provisions being a scheme within a scheme, essentially. And while LPS 7 is a different regime from the set of provisions that the SAT was looking at, that scheme within a scheme still prevails. It's made more complicated by the fact that those regimes are different. As an example, the old regime gave limits in relation to metres above ground level. This current regime under LPS 7 looks at the number of stories. And quite unusually, it's one of these things that it's not until you actually go digging that you see other errors in this. There's no definition of what a story is. So, as an example, the RAR says this is a 32-storey building, but 2 of those stories are below ground level. One would normally discount those for the purpose of looking at height as an issue of amenity. Now we say that approval is, that the DAP has the capacity to make a determination in favour of what we are seeking, because pursuant to this scheme, what is being sought is not an application for comprehensive new development. This development has substantially commenced. It could be implemented in its current form because it has substantially commenced. And Schedule C of the planning of LPS 7 makes it quite clear in provision 2 that those provisions relating to height and floor areas and gross floor plate areas, etc., only relate to comprehensive new development. And anything else is required to be determined based upon the other development standards and requirements that sit within the body of the LPS 7. We say that this application is an amendment to an existing development or a pre-scheme development. And unlike some schemes, this scheme actually contemplates a circumstance where there is a requirement for variation/addition to a pre-scheme development. And in this case, we say that we are a pre-scheme development and therefore fall within clause 32 of the scheme. We recognise that one of the conditions or requirements for that pre-scheme development in terms of height at least is that it sits within the existing building envelope. However, there is power for variation of that because clause 34 of the scheme gives an unfettered power for the variation of any of the development standards that are set out in clause 32. And so we say, having established that this is not a comprehensive new development, having established that this is a pre-scheme development, as that term's used in the LPS 7, and that therefore the power for variation is invoked under clause 34, that there is power for the DAP to make that determination. It is, of course, then open for the DAP to make a determination either way, based upon the normal elements of discretion and the application of orderly and proper planning. But the city, having said that the actual physical changes are, in their words, de minimis, we say that a determination in the affirmative should be granted in this circumstance. Thank you very much. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Thank you, presenters. Questions from panel?
Thank you, presiding member. Karen Hyde speaking. Mr. Lees, I think you offered during questions to explain a little further the exchange of information that has recently occurred between your client and the adjacent lot. There were some questions around the waste vehicle turning movements encroaching upon that lot, which was contrary to previous approvals. So could you explain a little further how you've resolved that matter, please?
Absolutely. Yesterday afternoon, we received a notification that there was a written submission on behalf of that neighbouring landowner with respect to the turning templates of the waste truck in the application material, which showed a portion of the waste vehicle encroaching across the property boundary onto that neighbouring site, which was raised as a concern. We have had our traffic consultant on the project team have a look at that yesterday afternoon, this morning, and they have managed to demonstrate through an updated swept path that the waste vehicle can still reasonably manoeuvre onto the property, into the waste loading bay, and then exit onto Mill Point Road in a forward gear without encroaching across that property boundary. I circulated that swept path diagram to the DAP Secretariat and included the submitter, Alan Stewart, in that email exchange. Alan replied to say, can't remember his exact words, but it appeared he was satisfied with what was demonstrated. So on that basis, I take it that that concern has been addressed. I would also acknowledge that in the alternate recommendation for approval, condition number 43 is a waste management plan to the city's satisfaction. I believe through the satisfaction of that condition, this could be documented in a formal sense to the city's satisfaction, whereby that final waste management plan can include the updated swept path to demonstrate that the truck does not need to encroach across the boundary. On that basis, I would suggest that the submitter is satisfied.
Questions?
Yes, through Chairman. There is a parking shortfall of 4 bays, but a surplus of residential parking. Had you considered the ability to provide some of the surplus parking for the shortfall and take away one of your bugbears as far as the objectives are concerned?
Yeah, so the 4-bay shortfall, as you've noted, comprises a shortfall of 3 residential visitor bays and 1 commercial tenancy bay. I think the commercial tenancy shortfall of 1 bay, I think can be appropriately addressed, which on the basis that this is a small bar, it's 212 square metres. We are of the view that 3 parking bays for a small bar of 212 square metres is more than sufficient. We would say it is not a critical issue in terms of a 1-bay shortfall for a licensed premises. Looking at other licensed premises parking requirements in other local government areas, I would observe that the city's requirement of 2 bays for every 100 square metres of commercial floor space, regardless of the land use, which is how the city's activity centre plan deals with commercial parking. It doesn't distinguish between different commercial land uses. I would say that that's quite a high ratio compared to others. So on that basis, we believe the 1 commercial car bay shortfall is justifiable and is not sufficient enough to warrant the refusal of the application. There is a reciprocal parking arrangement also proposed with the commercial parking bays for the residential visitor bays. So there is an ability to manage that through the nature of reciprocity and differing demands between residential visitors and commercial staff or commercial patrons of that proposed small bar. That is our proposition on the shortfall. Dare I say, we would hate to see this application fall over because of a 3 or 4 bay car parking shortfall. So I would respectfully suggest that if the DAP is of a mind to grant an approval today, best case for us would be with the parking as is presented on the basis of the justification that we put forward. But I think our client would be comfortable to accept a condition to require that shortfall to be removed through the reallocation of resident bays to address the 3 visitor plus 1 commercial bay.
Okay, thank you. Further questions?
Oh, just one other. Noise levels. There have been some concerns expressed about noise from the small bar on adjoining residents. Are you confident you can manage that through a management plan of some sort?
We are. We note there is we have suggested to the city that a small bar liquor licence management plan be a condition of any approval that's granted. That would be the appropriate document to set out how the operation of that small bar needs to comply with the environmental noise protection regulations. It would have a complaints management procedure in there. We believe through adequate construction and acoustic mitigation measures within the fit out of the small bar that any acoustic matters can be addressed so that noise does not emanate beyond the boundary of the site, beyond what the noise regs allow for.
I think just adding to that is there's a requirement for compliance in any event, and it's an ongoing requirement. So, you know, when one is approving a land use, it's approving the land use in isolation of the operator of the, and so which is why most of those things are managed more appropriately through a management plan. And it's sometimes not necessarily the noise of music, but it's the timing of the pickup of particularly glass bottles and things like that, so that's not impacting upon the quiet enjoyment of the residents. But that can be dealt with, we say, through the management plan.
I think lastly, we'd just like to highlight we have apartments directly above, much closer to that wine bar than the neighbours are situated. So I think we've responded within our provisions in our bylaws for our buyers. There's going to be time restrictions as to when that bar must close. and we'll also be ensuring that our buyers who live directly above will be have good, quiet environment at the right time, which will spread throughout the neighbourhood.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Walker.
Yes, I think it's been covered already, because my question was really in relation to the amenity of the area. And I know from my position on council that that particular area on that particular street is the subject of an awful lot of complaints, both in respect of parking and in respect of noise. And I did find it quite curious that there was not a noise management plan. And as you said, Ms. Maharich, approving a land use is something that is proved, and it runs with the land, and it will run into perpetuity. And so the concerns in respect to exacerbating an existing issue that's already in that particular location, I don't really feel like it's been appropriately addressed. And I've, in the absence of having a noise report, and I'm not sure that having a noise management plan is.
Well, what's your question?
I guess my question is asking what further and additional steps are you able to do other than just a noise management plan?
Well, perhaps I can just go back one step. Councillor, I'm also a resident of South Perth, and I know exactly there are lots of complaints from that location. Not necessarily to do with land uses, but more the hoons that run up and down Middle Point Road at different times of the day, which is a real problem in the peninsula area. So it's recognised that is an issue, and that there must be many residents that you would have direct contact with who are highly sensitive to the impact on amenity of that. I think the fact that this is within a building, we've heard from Jonathan that there are limits on the time period within which the bar can be opened in the strata documentation. But in any event, there is a requirement for compliance with the noise regulations, regardless of whether or not that puts anything on this as a condition on this approval today. It's good practice, and we're inviting the DAP to impose a noise management plan, because that allows for things that are particularly irritating to people, as I said. So the scraping of tables along the ground as things are being packed up, and the emptying of bins, etc., are done at times that are acceptable and don't impact the residents, both in this development but within the locality. So I don't think necessarily that any further modelling or a noise impact report at this stage would actually be particularly helpful until the development is finalised and the fit out's undertaken, to be honest, and that noise management plan's done at that stage. And sometimes they will also have things like limiters on speakers in the development. I mean, bearing in mind that it's a very, very small tenancy, 212 square metres. The Liquor Control Act limits the number of patrons to 120. And we're in a very residential location. So all of those things will work in favour of a low intensity style of development in this location.
Thank you. Further question? Despite the city sale or suggesting that this is a minor, or these are minor changes, did you turn your mind to whether or not you actually satisfied the regulations in terms of being a Form 2 application?
Well, the Form 2 requires that it's not a substantial change to the development. And in the context of a building that's 101 metres in height, in terms of height, I would say that might, and there's no change in the number of stories to the development, that certainly is not a substantial change in the physical form of the building. Mr. Lees has made reference to the fact that even though there has been a slight increase in the gross floor plate area, it's entirely disguised by the banded verandas that sit around the whole of the development. So externally, it won't impact at all the look of the building. The change in use, again, we say is, change in use is not usually something that would be substantial in the context of the number of square metres of area in this particular building would be considered a substantial change.
Thank you.
I think also just when we compare it to recent Form 2s we've had approved, we've had Form 2s approved with not substantial but quite large increases to plot ratio as well as gross building area, which sit outside schemes. So in relation to previous approvals we've had via Form 2s, I believe that this is much less than what has been approved in the past.
Thank you.
I was going to say the case law on this talks about the change is striking at the heart. It's the language that they use, striking at the heart of the existing approval, and certainly I don't think you could say that about this project.
Thank you. Further questions, Karen?
Just a couple more, if I may. Thank you. Mr. Lees, I think you mentioned the addendum to the RAR and the conditions as set out. The city has identified those conditions which are in their view to be edited, mostly in accordance with the change from Planning Scheme 6 to 7, those which are to be edited in accordance with the changes as per 2, and others which are to be deleted. Have you had a chance to consider those in detail? Have any issues with any of those aspects of amendment or deletion?
Short answer is no, we don't have any issue with both. I think the way the city has structured this addendum, I think it is very clear, it's very helpful, and I think the options that are proposed to be retained, those that are to be deleted, very clear, and I really address the change in planning scheme as well as the minor amendments that we're proposing here. So I've reviewed these in detail.
Okay, thank you. And just one other, if I may, thank you. Just picking up on Constable's issue around management of the bar element without prejudicing our decision. But is it more appropriate to think in the terms of an operational management plan rather than just simply noise management? I'm not sure how your applicant would feel about that.
That's okay for Mary.
I think that makes more sense because it captures all.
Indeed. Thank you.
We're very mindful. We have a reputation as a developer to defend as well. So in our best interests, we need to set a very strict guideline on the operator of that space because we've got 115 residences living directly above. The reputation is very good for our business. So we're supportive of working with the city in any way to make this work.
All right. Thank you.
I want to go back to the conditions or the proposed with the case that in a Form 2 that the conditions should only relate to the changes that occur and necessarily to it's like changing from Scheme 6 to Scheme 7.
In my mind to this on a number of occasions, and I think we don't necessarily have difficulty with it because but it's
There were some that we'd like to discuss. We're most happy to Daryl, if it's okay.
Well, I suppose I walk at when there's been a change of planning scheme because I think that remains an historical don't think there's a need. That's my personal view, but I should be asking questions at the moment. So, but I will ask the city that as well. Any further questions?
Sorry. We got into the condition 3, which is being deleted, makes no reference of the small bar approval. Does it have to? Although that's what's being applied for the amendment, so I suppose it doesn't. It's implicit in the fact. Okay.
That was taken out because a lot of those were the community benefit
Yes.
uses, which have now been supplanted by the contribution under the new regime.
Okay.
All right, just going back to the conditions. If I look at 22. The officers have changed that condition, and the reasoning is it's an amended condition to provide certainty and enforceability.
Relates to the glazing.
Yes.
Specific in terms of proportion.
To this.
I think we can make some amendments if that's required.
I think the nature of the condition is entirely consistent. 75% figure that's included in the proposed amended condition, which we're comfortable with.
So I'm overly complicating it.
All right.
I think with, sorry, presiding member, condition 24, prior to or in conjunction with the submission of a building or demolition permit, I presume the demolition is already finished.
Yes.
So they're sort of introducing conditions that
Yes.
when you don't relate to
Okay,
we can discuss that.
The officers that, and then we can deal with that later. Okay. No further questions? Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move to the officers. Okay. What have we got there? That's
Hello, I am Scott Van Eland, Assessing Officer at the City, and sorry, just out of frame, my colleagues Courtney Wynn and Fiona Mellon is also in the room.
okay. Good. Thank you for that. Members of the panel, are there questions of the officers?
Yes, please. Thank you, Presiding Member. Karen Wright speaking. During questions of the applicant, there was some consideration of perhaps the requirement for an operational management plan to cover aspects of how the bar element proposed might be managed and operated, which would include, amongst other things, how noise or activities that might create noise which would impact amenity could be managed. Would that be something that the city would be amenable to? Are there particular words that you would put forward? Did you consider that in constructing the alternate that you've provided us with?
Yes, thank you for the question. So in the case of the application, we have no objection should the DAP wish to impose an operational management condition. We think the key consideration in relation to the proposal are probably your parking and your noise associated with the land use. We note that the parking has been adequately addressed within the applicant's traffic impact statement, with the exception of the shortfall of the bays, which again can be accommodated with the reciprocal parking arrangement, should the DAP choose to approve that. Additionally, the remaining concern is a noise management plan, which we do recommend as a condition of determination. So between those two conditions, those are the two key components we'll be looking at as part of an operational management plan. We don't believe that's necessary in its entirety, but would also have no objection should the DAP decide to impose such a condition.
Okay, could you just, I see that there's a desire for an acoustic management. Could you point me to the condition of noise management? Or are you calling them the same thing?
I believe it's, sorry, just
I'm looking specifically at the table that you've provided within the addendum.
yeah, I'm just trying to confirm exactly which condition. Sorry, my apologies. Yes, thank you for that. Number 44. So an acoustic report shall be provided as part of the city's assessment and overall approval of the acoustic report. We'd expect a noise management plan to be lodged with that, forming an addendum to the acoustic report.
I'm not sure that's explicit through this, but thank you. Thank you for that answer.
Further questions?
Another one, if I may. Thank you. Something that has been raised through the advertising of this application is the issue of moving from community benefit process, which was the case under Scheme 6, to one of cash in lieu, which is the case under Scheme 7. I'm assuming that the city perhaps has a preference for that now, because that might enable you to spend money where you feel is most needed. But I just wanted to clarify with you that for the purpose of this development, that had been thoroughly considered and that the cash in lieu option was preferred.
So the cash in lieu is definitely the city's preferred option in terms of providing community benefit. The local planning scheme and the associated South Perth ACP framework does have a rigorous set of community benefit options that can be provided, and a hierarchy in which they can be provided as part of the framework. So the city's preference is to pursue those projects and generally provide a broader, more accessible community benefit than a community benefit contained within a development. So it is the city's preference in this case.
Thank you for that.
Scott, in the I have an email here regarding condition 21, which was to do with the GART. But condition 21 in the addendum is a different condition. Well, apparently it was agreed between yourselves and the applicant to revise condition 21 for public art.
There was a minor change to the condition requiring public art as part of the proposal. It was purely a clarification point to note the public art contribution is capped at $500,000.
500,000.
Correct.
Okay, which is different to the email that I have seen here. Okay, so which condition, if it's not condition 21, which is it then?
Condition 25. Oh, sorry, my sincere apologies. Capped at 1% to the maximum value of $1 million.
That's what the email says, yes.
Yeah, my apologies.
Right. Okay, so that was agreed with the applicants, yes. Yes. All right, any further questions? Do you have any comment on my concerns around changing conditions which are not related to the various amendments within this proposal?
Only the conditions that the city has sought to amend, it comes from the position of a condition clearance request prior to the lodgement of a building permit. It is, so when we're looking to clear conditions of development approval, subject, for example, one of the previous questions relating to the transparency of the glazing, is to provide both certainty for the city and for the applicant as to when it comes to clear that condition, what is exactly required, and we move debate at that time. I will also note that the city has been liaising with the applicant for the drafting of these conditions, who have raised no concerns to the changes proposed.
Okay. All right. Further questions?
Yes, just one regarding the parking shortfall. Is the city comfortable with cash in lieu for that?
For the car parking shortfall, cash in lieu would not be applicable as it relates to a residential component, and the non-residential component is a shortfall of 1 bay. So cash in lieu would not be applicable. The city's preference in this case is that the car parking shortfall would be accommodated within the surplus residential bays for the development.
Which is what you said in the row, yes. Thank you.
Right.
All right. Thank you. No further questions?
I think there was one I had in regard to the amalgamation process, which is another one that then calls for an easement on the way down the side. Can that all be done at the same time?
Yes, definitely. Those two processes can run concurrently. I know the city has already actioned a condition clearance of the subdivision, so we are aware the applicant is making strides to clear that condition at this time already, and those works are underway.
Thank you.
Okay. So further questions? Okay, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Our officers. We'll move on then to the item. Going back to the bar. All the recommendation for refusal reasons. Is there a mover for the recommendation for refusal? For War, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Okay, that lapses for want of a seconder. We'll move to the alternate recommendation, which is recommendation for approval with conditions. We'll ask for a mover for that. Hyde, thank you. A seconder. Coltos, thank you very much. Karen.
Thank you, presiding member. I was not in a position to support the refusal, particularly reasons 1 and 2. The DAP does have discretion to approve, which is what I'm moving. The variations, sort of height, gross floor plate area, etc. We do have discretion through clause 32 of LPS 7. And in this case, the DAP in the place of the local government may approve that application that doesn't comply with those additional site and development requirements. Now, the RAR in itself stipulates that the additional height and any impact is de minimis, and I would concur with those conclusions and the assessment within the RAR regarding the design and planning aspects of the proposal. And I don't support further that reason that was put forward for the parking shortfall, which was just a 3 to 4 car bay shortfall. I believe that as well, for development of this scale to be pretty insignificant. The area is well served by public transport, by bus and ferry. This particular location is within an activity centre and there are multiple options for parking available. So I don't regard that parking to be an issue to stand in the way of an approval. So I'm comfortable with the alternate. I do note that the alternate before us has a number of changes to the existing approval. There are changes to conditions 1 to 12, 13, 22, 24, 25, 26 and 32, and the deletion of 3, 18, 19, 33, 34, 35 and 36. So there's a number of aspects to be renumbered. The applicant has expressed their comfort with those changes, which gives me some certainty. The matter of community benefit, we've heard from the local government that they, under the new scheme, provide for a cash in lieu process so that they can apply the funds to areas and facilities and programs that they have identified as being needed, and the value of that benefit to be provided through cash in lieu is informed through the formula within the scheme, and there seems to be no question about that. I don't find there to be any further issues with parking or traffic or other amenity matters. The issue of the small bar will be dealt with through liquor licensing. It falls under other legislation, but I find the land use to be acceptable and supportable in this location. I have mentioned, however, the desire for an operational management plan. I remember, I don't know if you wish me to deal with that through this or seek a seconder and then come back to it.
I've got a seconder for
That, so.
I just to clarify that we are talking about the table with the new conditions and proposed conditions and the preamble from the previous
Yes,
R13, which is to accept, firstly to accept that the
as a form
application
2.
form 2 and then approve an application and then the conditions roll on from
Indeed,
there.
yes.
Jeannie, is that what you've?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. All right. If you would like to propose your new
Yes.
condition, and I'll see if the seconder is willing to.
Thank you. So I think the way that the conditions are renumbered, it's a new condition. I think the way that they're renumbered is it's 44, condition 44, but we can get to that once we have a look. And that new condition would be for the applicant to prepare and submit to the city an operational management plan with the bar element of the development to the satisfaction of the city, and a new advice note which would go with that, which would say that in relation to that new condition and the operational management plan, matters to be considered should include but not be limited to the noise management.
Okay, thank you. Just before I move on to the seconder, does that include the change to the public art condition?
Yes, I think that
Condition
the-
25.
the explanation of the captain.
Yes.
Yes, I think that's what you said, just,
Yes.
yes,
Okay, thank you.
happy with that.
Jean, second.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. And,
Okay,
prepare to accept the moving.
okay, thank you. A seconder?
Yes, look, I too agree that the advice we've been given and is that we have discretion to approve the amendments to the approved development. The built form has been supported through the RA. External appearance, RA talks about it being minimal impact for the external appearance of the building in terms of height, plot ratio, floor-plate area, waste management, traffic, parking, all of those issues have been addressed. the community benefits requirement for a cash in lieu contribution is favoured by the council, and I think that's appropriate. I had some concerns, I think, based on previous experience in dealing with small bars and taverns and so forth, and the impact on adjoining residents. But the operational management plan, I've had experience in imposing that condition and dealing with the implementation of those conditions, and I'm satisfied that they can be addressed. I also have experience of dealing with a cafe and residents living upstairs and how difficult they can be to the operators or the management of the strata. So I think that they'll be your most vocal critics. So all in all, I'm satisfied with that. I still, whilst I've had concerns about parking, I would suggest that the applicants are happy to include some of their surplus residential to cover that, but I think I won't be moving an amendment to incorporate that at the moment on the approval. So all in all, I'm satisfied with the proposed amendments and the conditions that have been suggested.
Thank you. Speaker against. Councillor Wall.
Thank you. The proposed application, as we know, seeks to amend a previous approval for a mixed-use development, and that includes the amalgamation of the ground floor tenancy and a change in use to a commercial use. So in my view, this actually does constitute a substantial change such that it doesn't really fall within the scope of what we would consider under Regulation 17. So in my view, the substantial amendments include the ground floor changes, being the amalgamation of tenancies and change to commercial land use, diverging from the approved mixed use intent. Levels 1 to 3, removing the commercial tenancies and adding multiple dwellings, in my view, significantly alters the approved built form and the use. And the removal of the communal facilities, combined with the addition of the rooftop terrace for the penthouses, I think is a significant departure from the original approval. And also the deletion of those conditions that were integral to the approval and directly tied to the community benefits and the public amenities and the planning standards. So in my view, all of their removal does constitute a fairly substantial amendment to the overall approval. And the impact of the removal of those conditions. So condition 13 is the required compliance with the Australian standards for parking conditions and critical parking needs. And we've had quite a lot of discussion about parking today, but I do think that it undermines the original parking strategy that was approved with the development. Condition 19 required trip facilities for visitors, which were part of the commitment to accessibility and usability. And conditions 32 to 36 were tied to community benefits such as multi-purpose spaces, public amenities and maintenance responsibilities. And so their removal does significantly reduce the development's contributions to the community. So the community benefits were actually contained within even the catchwords of the case that I have here, that it's has been considered in its whole. So the proposed amendments, in my view, don't really meet the local planning scheme number 7 requirements for the provisions of the South Perth Community Plan for residential visitor and commercial parking, and the shortfall of the parking bays with no clear mechanism for addressing this issue, particularly given the lack of clarity on how the parking will be utilised. The noise and amenity impacts that we've raised already, there's no accompanying noise management and acoustic report to address the potential adverse impacts from the proposed changes, and increased car movements and noise from the proposed development will likely detract from the amenity for the surrounding residences. The removal of the communal facilities and public benefits of the areas contradicts the intent of the approval granted based on the significant community contributions. And this amendment increases the community impacts while reducing public benefits and is an unacceptable trade-off. The substantial nature of the amendments, the proposed changes, in my view, are not minor or incidental. They fundamentally alter the essence of the approved development, which, in my view, constitutes a substantial amendment that would require a fresh application and a complete reassessment rather than consideration under this. So all in all, I don't consider this application to properly satisfy the conditions and regulations and I would exercise discretion to refuse that application due to the significant adverse impacts on the community and the surrounding amenity, because in my view, the proposal departs too far from the original approval and requires a full reassessment to ensure compliance. I'll sort of finish up there just in summary saying the proposed development exceeds the critical planning controls related to, obviously the height, the gross floor plate area, and it fails to meet parking requirements, which I think are fundamental to the integrity of the planning scheme, and the breach I don't think can be justified under the guise of an amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I am very supportive of this proposal and the proposed amendments. I perhaps might be a very simple character because in the overall context of the scheme, I can't see that these are substantial changes. I'm not going to list them all, but they are minor when we look at the total scheme, in my view. So I'm quite happy to accept that it is a Form 2 application. I don't have any issue with that at all. In terms of the change conditions, I've probably made it quite clear. I'm always a little bit concerned about going into conditions which have nothing to do with these amendments, and I get a little bit concerned that it's almost like reviewing the whole scheme again. And I understand what the city officers are saying, that this is all part of the clearance of conditions, but it's not how Form 2 is normally dealt with. It's normally just about conditions which relate only to those minor amendments. However, having said that, I'm happy to go down the path of at least resistance, but no, it's the path of the proposed conditions as listed there, including those changes. I don't think there's really any need to say any more. It's quite simple to me. It can be approved, and I think it should be approved. So I'm more than happy to support it. No further. Back to Karen as the mover.
Thank you. Thank you for everybody's comments. My view remains the same. I think substantially this development is very similar to that was previously approved through the SAT process. It is a mixed-use development which now has, in a number of minor aspects, been altered. In my view, therefore, it is rightly so a Form 2 application. I think the RAR sets out the city's assessment, which has been pretty thorough, both through the initial RAR and then further through further considerations as a result of the deferral. I think the city itself, through the scheme and through the observations of the provision of community benefit, are comfortable with the cash in lieu options which have been accepted, and those valuations of how that should be provided is set within the scheme and is not in any way objected to. I'm comfortable that amenity impacts are limited and can be mitigated, and I'm comfortable with the additional operational management plan process to ensure that the bar is operated and managed in the appropriate way. I accept that it's a fairly unusual way to proceed with things, but given the complexity of the particular development and the discussions that have surrounded it, it gives some clarity to the applicant as to what conditions remain from the past approval, what conditions are being amended, and what conditions are being deleted. So in that respect, I'm comfortable that there's some clarity and consistency between past decision and this decision. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Presiding.
Thank you, thank you. I'm going to put that to the vote. All in favour? Against? That's carried. 3-1. Thank you. Moving on to there's a list of SAP items there, and I'll close the meeting at 2:14. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance. Thank you.